Bruchim haboim. Welcome everyone. We're about to begin Be'ezras Hashem together on Daf Tzadik Aleph Amud Aleph, starting with the new Mishnah on the bottom of Tzadik Amud Beis. The Mishnah tells us about certain people who you might think cannot be included in Korban Pesach, and the Mishnah is mechadesh that they can also be included. As follows: Ha'oinein, one who is misabil over his 7 close relatives, father, mother, son, daughter, brother, sister, and spouse. And min haTorah, he's prohibited from eating kachim during the day, but already at night he can eat kachim. Ha'mefakeach es hagal, one during the time of the Korban Pesach has to then try to unearth a person who was buried underneath a rubble, and there it's a suffix whether there's a person there or not. V'chei mi shehivtichuhu similarly, a person who was promised that he's going to then be freed from prison. And an ill person, as well as an elderly man, who can eat at that point a kazayis of basar. The din is sheichtin aleihin. In all these cases, you can sheichet the Korban Pesach for him. Beginning with the oinen. The oinen, we said that midi araisa, he's only prohibited from eating kachim during the day. However, midirabanan, he cannot eat even the following night. So we don't require that he fulfill. In other words, we're not stringent on him regarding the dirabanan of not eating kachim, and therefore he can go ahead and be included in this Korban Pesach to eat it at night. One who is mefakech as hagal, so there's a suffix. Maybe a person's there, maybe a person's not there. Certainly on the side that the person is there and he's dead, then he calls it an oihel. However, where maimid, the person who is mefakech alagal al chezkosoi, to say that at this point he's tar, there's no reason to believe that he became tamei at the point of shchitas hakarban. When it comes to them who are promised him to free him from the Beis HaAsurin, so that's enough for us to then assume and presume that he will be able to then go ahead and be partaking in the Korban Pesach. And finally, the Zoken or the Choyle, there's no reason to believe that they will become sick enough that they cannot eat a kazayis of basar, or that the elderly one will not be able to also partake in a kazayis of basar. So therefore, we can sheichet the Korban Pesach on their behalf as well. The Mishnah goes on to say, Al kulom ein sheichtin aleim bifnei atzmon shem yaviu es haPesach lidei psul. However, if it's only a group, only a chabura of these individuals, then we say no. They cannot be included, be shechted for the Korban Pesach. For example, if you have a group of oinanin as the chabura, so then that is not going to then be satisfied, and therefore we'll say that you cannot sheichet the Korban Pesach for them. Because again, as the Mishnah states, Shema yavi as a Pesach lidei psul. The Mishnah goes on to say, Lefikach im eira bahem psul peturim melasus Pesach sheni. Therefore, if indeed, let's say the choyle, the zoken, becomes in a situation where he cannot eat the kazayis of basar, we say that nonetheless he is potter from Korban Pesach sheni, and he fulfilled his obligation with the rishon. Because at this time of the shechita, he was in a state where he could eat a kazayis of basar, only he became a little bit more ill and was not able to eat at the time of the achilas kachim, the achilas Korban Pesach. So he's yoytzei lidei chavosei. The Mishnah concludes, however, there's an exception, chutz min hamefakech begal shehu tamei mitchilosei. The exception is the one who determined that there was indeed a dead body that he unearthed. So the assumption is that he became tamei from the very beginning. It became an oihel, and since he was now tamei meis, he's now pushed off to then do the Korban Pesach sheni, and he's not fulfilling his mitzvah with the Korban Pesach rishon, because even the shas shchita, he was in a state of tuma. Says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Bar Huna, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, to qualify what the Mishnah said. Lo shanu ela beis ha'asurin da'akum. That which we said, that only when they will free him, then he will then be able to go ahead and be included in the Korban Pesach. We're talking about over here, that's talking about only a Beis Hasurim to Akum that they have to promise that they free him. Aval Beis Hasurim the Yisrael shoychtim fnei atzmo kivan da'avtichinu mafikle. In other words, if there's only a full group of those who are promised to go out from the Beis Hasurim, so that's talking about a Beis Hasurim shel Akum. Then we say that indeed only because of the promise, but a Beis Hasurim the Yisrael, we say that even if they were only a group of those who are imprisoned, that they are promised to go out, that's good enough for us to rely upon. Whereas again, in the first case, where it's those who are included in the Chabura are people who are in the Beis Hasurim, but since the Beis Hasurim the Akum, so therefore they have to be promised. But in a Beis Hasurim the Yisrael, so then we say shoychtim b'fnei atzmin, even if it's their own group. And why is that? Says the Gemara, D'chsiv she'eris Yisrael liyasu avlo lo yidabru kozov, because the remnants of Klal Yisrael, they don't do avlon, they don't speak deceit, and therefore if they promise, then we can presume that this will actually become true and they'll get freed for Pesach. Rav Chizda said, Ho de amris beis hasurim ha'akum, even that which you said beis hasurim ha'akum, lo yamon elachus lechoymaz beis pagi. That which you said that you need the promise of the beis hasurim ha'akum, that's only talking about that he's going to be freed if it was in a situation when the prison was outside of Yerushalayim. However, but if it was within the walls of Yerushalayim, even as far as the Beis Pagi, then you can still shecht for those prisoners, even in the Beis Akum. Why? The Beis Hasurim Shel Akum. Why, says the Gemara? My taima. Because you can bring the meat of the Korban Pesach to where their prison is. And therefore, since the prison is located within Yerushalayim, so therefore you can shech the Pesach and bring the Korban Pesach to have him eat it in Yerushalayim where he's imprisoned. The Mishnah quotes, Lifikach im eiro bohen psul, petur milasus Pesach sheni. He said that these that were mentioned in the Mishnah, with the exception of those who are mefakech es hagal, they fulfill the mitzvah of Korban Pesach Rishon. They don't have to bring a Korban Pesach Sheni. So even if the ill person is ultimately in a state where he cannot eat a kezayis of a Korban Pesach, we say he is fulfilling his obligation because the shas of the shechita, he was yes able to eat a kezayis. Omar Rabbe bar Rav Chane, Omar Rabbi Yochanan, Lo shanu elagal agol. That which we said that the exception is those who are mefakech es hagal, they still have to bring a Korban Pesach Sheni, and we're not fulfilling their mitzvah of Korban Pesach Rishon. That's talking about, he qualifies with a gal that is agol. That means it's round. And therefore, since it's round, the moment that he begins searching for this person who is underneath the rubble, he will become tameh. If there was a dead person there, that means he already became tameh from the beginning, because it was mahil. Aval gal oroich poter melasois pesach sheni. But if it was in an elongated type of rubble, so then when he started from one side, then he wasn't necessarily becoming tameh when they ultimately came to the dead body, and therefore he's poter from bringing a Korban Pesach Sheni. Eimor Torah hayim mishash shchita. So there's no need to then bring a Pesach Sheni. He was fulfilling his mitzvah already b'shas the shchita when he was Torah during the Pesach Rishon. Tanya Nami Hochi, the Gemara says we have a brisa that supports exactly what we're saying. Rabbi Shimon ben Noishel, Rabbi Yochanan ben Broika Omer, Mefakeach begal, itim poter itim chayev. When the one is mefarech is a gal, and he ultimately finds somebody who's dead down below, so sometimes he is poter from Korban Pesach Sheni, and sometimes he's chayev that he did not fulfill his mitzvah from Korban Pesach Rishon. Ketzad, says the brisa, how? Gal ogol v'nimtza tuma tachtov chayev. If it's a round type of gal, then we say that when he found the mace underneath, so the moment that he began searching, which is the b'shas the shchita, he already became tamei. It was mahil. Gal oroich v'nimtzas tuma tachta poter. Whereas if it was elongated, so then from the time that he began the search, he wasn't yet tamei, because it wasn't over the place where the dead body was. So therefore, he fulfilled his mitzvah because Shas Shechita, he was still Tor. Eima Tor, Haya B'Shas Shechita. The next mission the Gemara brings states as follows: Ein shoichtin es ha-pesach ala yochid. Div Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda holds that when a person shechs the korban pesach, you cannot do so for just an individual. It has to be for a chabur, which is at least 2 people or more. Rabbi Yosi matir. Rabbi Yosi says you could shech the korban pesach even for 1 person. V'afilu chabura shel meya she'enan yichoin le'echol kezayis ein shechna aleim. But even if you have a chabura of 100 and not one of them can eat a kezayis of the meat of korban pesach, then it's not a valid shechita. It's not a valid korban pesach. In other words, he says that as long as you have 1 person who can eat a kezayis, that's sufficient. Ve'ein oisin chaburas noshim v'avodim v'ktanim. And the Mishnah concludes that you do not make a chabura of those who are included in the korban pesach of sole people that are just noshim, avodim, and ketanim. The Gemara will explain why. Says the Gemara, bring the following brayso: Tanu Rabbanan minayin shein shoichnes haPesach ala yochid. Where do we know that one cannot shech the korban pesach on an individual? Answers the brayso Tamu Loimar, brings a posuk: Lo soichal lizboyach es haposach. You're not allowed to shech the korban pesach be'achad she'arech in one of your gates asher Hashem Elokecha noisin loch. So says the brayso Tamu Loimar, Lo sucha lizboyach es haposach be'echod. Di Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda darshins the pasuk. Although the pasuk says you shall not shech the korban pesach in one of your gates, but it didn't have to say be'echad she'arecha. It could have said lo sucha lizboyach es haposach b'sha'arecha and skip the word be'echad. The fact that it says be'echad comes to then what seems to be superfluous. Comes Rabbi Yehuda to darshan it, to teach me. Lo tuchal lizboyach es haposach be'echad psik. You cannot shech the korban pesach even for an individual. Those are the words of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yosi oimer. Rabbi Yosi says yachid v'yachal la'ochloi shoytin alav. As long as the yachid can eat a kazayis, then you can shech the korban pesach for him. Asar ve'en yichoyin la'ochloi ein shoytin aleim. But if there are 10 who cannot even one of them eat a kazayis of basar, then you can't shech for them. Rabbi Yosi hai be'echad my avile. Ask the Gemara, since we find Rabbi Yehuda darshan the word echad because echad again seems to be superfluous, then what does Rabbi Yosi do with that word echad? Answer the Gemara, mi boy like Rabbi Shimon. He uses the word echad in this pasuk like that which Rabbi Shimon taught. The Tanya, Rabbi Shimon oimer minayin lezoybeach es pischoi bebomas yochid. Where do we know that when a person takes a korban pesach and shechs it on a personal bama, a personal altar, in the times when the altars, the bamos are osir, meaning there are time when there is a mishkan or time of Beis Hamikdash, and it's osir to use bamos, and he then shechs the korban pesach on a bama yachid. Where do we know that indeed he's over loisase? Granted, he's not going to be over. He's not going to be chayiv kares, because over here we're talking about a case where he brought the korban pesach early, and therefore if it was before chatzos, even if we would bring it inside, if there was a time of a Beis Hamikdash, if it was before the time of chatzos, he would not be then a valid korban. So he cannot be chayiv for shchutei chutz if it's going to be a time where he cannot bring it inside, so he can't be chayiv kores. But where do we know there's chayiv elav? Ask the brayso. Talmud loymar lo sucha lizboyach es haPesach bi'achad sharecha. From there we learn the pasuk that you're not allowed to then shech the korban pesach in one of your gates, meaning to say outside the Beis Hamikdash. So you're still over alav. Yochel asked the brayso af b'shas heter habomos kain. Even during time when you could, yes, use the bamos, maybe you're also over alav. So although it's osir, but you're not over alav, says Rabbi Shimon. Tamulon be'echad shi'arech. Use the word echad to teach me you all have to be together in the same city. Lo yomru ela b'shar shekol Yisrael nichnasim b'shar echad. And therefore, although you're not over alav, but it's still osir, because since a korban pesach is a pesach that's a korban that's chayva, and it's considered to be a korban sibur, even though individuals bring it, it cannot be brought in a bama yachid. Rabbi Yehuda asked the Gemara, "Hi mani lei." Where does he know this from? That which we just learned from Rabbi Shimon, that indeed a person who brings a korban pesach on a bama yachid during the time when you could bring korbanos on bamos. Where do we know that you are not over the lav? And you use the word echad be'echad sharecha. Where do we know Rabbi Yehuda? Where does Rabbi Yehuda know this from? Because Rabbi Yehuda already uses the word echad to teach me you cannot shech the korban pesach for an individual. The Gemara answers Rabbi Yehuda, Tarti Shamas Mina. He learns out from the word echad both things, that you aleph cannot shecht a korban pesach for an individual, and beis, that if you do shecht a korban pesach on a bama, that is a bama ketana, on an individual bama, you will not be over lav, as the pasuk states, be'echad sharecha. Rabbi Yosi mimayda lohachi dekama Rabbi Shimon asked the Gemara, how does Rabbi Yosi know to learn like Rabbi Shimon and darshan echad this way? Perhaps it is like Rabbi Yehuda is saying, to be used for the drasha of that you cannot shecht for an individual. How does Rabbi Yosi not also learn that? Instead, Rabbi Yosi says you can shecht for an individual so long as he can eat a kazayas. Omar loch, Rabbi Yosi would say to you, Loi sal kedaitach, don't even go up on your mind such a thought that you can shecht for one individual, that you cannot shecht for one individual. The Haksiv, Ish Lefi Achloi. It says in regard to Korban Pesach, each one according to his eating, you shall shecht. So therefore, clearly you can shecht the Korban Pesach even for an individual.